We are here with a very special snippet of an episode because there has been a lot that's gone on in the few hours since we recorded and released our last episode.
Yes, I mean, our episode was recorded post-second semifinal, and you wouldn't think that in the day and a half between that and the grand final, so much would have happened.
Yeah, welcome to Eurovision at Malmö 2024.
Oh my gosh. I think this must be the most dramatic grand finale that has ever been in Eurovision.
Yeah, and it hasn't even happened yet.
Right. So let's take stock of what's happened since the episode that we just dropped.
Right. So first, the big story. This was late breaking yesterday. There started to be rumors around the press center that Yost, who is the contestant from the Netherlands, or was the contestant from the Netherlands,
Right.
had gotten into some sort of altercation backstage. Now,
Now, the rumors went crazy.
yes.
The big news story is the fact that Israel made it through the second semifinal, and there's been a lot of tension due to that.
Yost, I believe, hid himself under a flag at some
Yes.
point while Eden Golan, the Israeli contestant, was speaking.
Also, when Eden Golan got a question about whether she thought it was fair putting other people at risk of her being there, someone on her team said, "You don't have to answer that." And Yost said, "Why not?"
Right. So this led to rumors that immediately started when we had heard that Yost had been ejected from a rehearsal, ejected from the arena, that it had something to do with a conflict with the Israeli delegation. Now, that was not true. What actually happened, and this is what's emerged over the last day or so, is that there was some altercation backstage with a photographer. Now, the EBU, the European Broadcasting Union that puts on Eurovision, has now disqualified Yost. He is not going to be performing in the contest.
There's an investigation by the Swedish police happening, and then eventually it was announced that the Netherlands are not going to be in the grand final.
Yeah, and this is incredibly rare, right? The show is so tightly controlled that you're not allowed to change anything about your act from the semifinal to the final.
Be disqualified day of.
There are probably a lot of people on the tech team who are drinking a lot of extra coffee today. Up until a few minutes ago, you would walk around and you would see people on the ground wearing Yost t-shirts because people had essentially assumed that he was ejected for making some statement against Israel's participation. And I think that just goes to show, or goes to say, that like this year, this festival, everything is infused with Israel.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Twitter was full of people referring to Yost as like a hero, right? Thank you for standing up, blah, blah, blah. Now it turns out that he just had an altercation with a Swedish staff member.
Yes.
So to add to all of this, Eurovision keeps all their voting numbers secret until after the contest is over. Now, during the Italian broadcast, apparently RAI, the Italian broadcaster, showed what their televote numbers were.
For the semifinal.
For the semifinal 2, the one that included Israel. It was an accident, and it's been discussed whether those were the real numbers or not. But the important point is that it showed that almost 40% of their televote went to Israel. Now, the result of that is that the betting markets have now jumped Israel up to second place of chances of winning, because I think their assumptions are, with all of the people who don't like Israel boycotting Eurovision, it seems like very pro-Israel people are still watching, and that's going to sway the vote.
Right. And if you've listened to this podcast, you know that the winner of a competition can change the identity of the competition, right? Like, Magnus, you've talked about this with Conchita Wurst. That performance crowned Eurovision as this ultimate queer LGBT festival. So Israel winning this year, days after the invasion into Rafah, I think would very much change the identity of the contest.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, as we've talked about many times, winning means you're offered to host.
Right.
So at the rehearsal during the day today, Bambi Thug did not show up, Ireland's representative. They released a statement on their Instagram that stated why, and it's because that they made a complaint to the EBU about what the Israeli commentator said during the Israeli broadcast. And they are saying that this is against the EBU rulebook, and they're asking for them to be disqualified hours before the broadcast.
Bambi Thug, as an artist, is someone who was censored by the EBU some of the body paint that they initially had called for a ceasefire, which the EBU decided was against its rules. The other piece of context for this is the way things work from the EBU's perspective is that this is not a competition among countries, it's a competition among public broadcasters. So the Israeli commentator works for Khan, the Israeli public broadcaster, and therefore the actions of that person reflect on the delegation, and the delegation is technically who is participating in Eurovision. And the EBU has hid behind this in terms of not wanting to talk about the differences between Russia's actions and Israel's actions, because they'd rather draw the distinction between Russian broadcasters and Khan. And so I think there is probably a part of this that is like, okay, great, you want to talk about this on those terms?
So to add even more fuel to the dumpster fire of a situation we have right now,
Yes.
at least 3 of the acts didn't show up for the flag parade, which is what opens the show.
Right.
And not only that, Slimane, who represents France, went to perform during the daytime show today, made a speech instead of doing his song. He mentioned United by Music, but that should be through peace. These rehearsals, like, these are ticketed shows.
Right.
There are 9,000-10,000 people in this arena.
Yeah.
So when you get to Bambi Thug performing in front of this roughly 10,000 people, they're not there.
Right.
When it gets to Franz performing, they
Right.
do a speech instead of a majority of their song.
Right.
When it gets to the flag parade, people are missing. This is happening in a full arena.
And then there's no Europapa.
The reality is that hours before this broadcast, we have no idea what's going to happen.
100%.
EBU are very strict on the fact that you're supposed to do the same thing in all of these shows because they're practicing every camera angle, every cue, and we're seeing artist after artist get more and more comfortable with the fact that maybe they're speaking out, maybe they don't show up.
We are at the precipice of something new. A lot of the tension that we've talked about during this season of how Eurovision, which for a while got very comfortable being a very apolitical festival, Europe has only gotten more divided since we began this season. And I think that we're only going to see that play out tonight. We expected the audience to boo Eden Golan, the Israeli contestant. What I did not expect, and what we heard last night, was that Martin Osterdahl, who is the executive supervisor of Eurovision, who has a very sort of ceremonial role in kicking off the voting, even he was booed.
Yeah.
So there's this idea that we're now looking at this mass market festival that really comes from a time when everybody, no matter what your political opinion, sat down and watched, and it was this navigation of, I'm going to be part of this giant community, and there's going to be a lot of disagreement, and we're going to kind of keep it polite and quiet. I think we are now firmly in the 2020s with Eurovision.
I think what it also comes down to is Europe is getting increasingly divided, and Eurovision, its popularity and its importance in the cultural zeitgeist, which we've talked about all season, really is at its most successful in many ways and on its way to becoming even more successful.
Yeah.
But that means more eyes on you. There are 1,000 journalists in the press center running around trying to get answers from each other.
I fully agree. And, we're going to have an episode out next week that will have much more fleshed out thoughts. But we just thought it was important, since we're here in Malmö, getting the information as quickly as it comes out.
I'm going to be watching. I think the future of this festival really is defined by what happens tonight. We will, of course, be with you next week. But until then, we hope that it will still be a happy Eurovision.
Agreed.